Welcome to IdeaGen TV. Today we have with us an incredible global leader, the president of ACS Athens, Peggy Polonis. Welcome, Peggy.
Thank you, Adriana. It's good to be here.
It's wonderful to have you. We're excited for you to join us as the lead here on interviewing a wonderful team of panelists, and we're so excited to hear from everyone.
It's really great to be here to talk about the fourth Sustainable Development Goal of quality education that we're all so passionate about.
We absolutely are. Thank you, Peggy. Well, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Adriana. Okay, I'm going to start by introducing our panel participants one by one. And so I want to start with Dr. Julie Woolman, who's the president of Widener University. Actually, Dr. Woolman is the 10th president of Widener. If I'm not wrong, Julie, also the first woman president, from what I recall, a passionate, fearless, and effective educator, higher educator. And she has a very clear vision, had a clear vision of and distinct goals for the university that focused on providing unparalleled student experience and institutional agility. She recently led an innovative strategy development process at the university that overcame the limitations of traditional strategic planning process and provides a new model for strategy in changing times. A very interesting thing about Dr. Julie Woolman is that she's on multiple boards, regionally and nationally, but she teaches at the local state prison on a regular basis. So prison education is very important to her. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Cam Chauhan, let's move on to Cam. Cam is the CEO of the Educational Collaborative for International Schools, ECIS, otherwise known as, and ECIS was the first educational collaborative to serve Europe and has grown into a leading global association. And Cam and the organization provide thought leadership, and I want to know more about that as we go along. But as I was looking at the values of ECIS, one just really popped out, and that was deep caring for humanity. So Cam has an impressive background in education and leadership. And in addition to that, she enjoys lecturing in mathematics and business. She holds qualifications and experience in leadership and professional development. And Cam worked with the UK government's Behavior Insight team to apply the nudge theory to improve student outcomes on a national level. So as CEO for ECIS, Cam is really committed to social justice and equity through diversity, inclusion, and intercultural understanding in international education. Great to have you, Cam.
Thank you, Peggy. Great to be here.
David Gleason, clinical psychologist and the author of a book called At What Cost? And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit. But Dr. David Gleason has over 30 years of experience in professional clinical psychology. He has served as a clinical neuropsychologist, a psychotherapist, and a school consultant in numerous U.S. public, independent, and international schools. Dr. Gleason is the founder of a consulting group, Developmental Empathy, LLC, and his new book, as I mentioned, At What Cost? Defending Adolescent Development in Fiercely Competitive Schools, was published in January of 2017. Great to see you, David. Annie Kostandinidi, she is our athletic director here at ACS Athens. We're really lucky to have her here, and a former national basketball star. Ms. Kostandinidis played basketball for McGill University and the Sporting Women's Basketball Club in Athens, Greece. Her sports career includes 10 national Hellenic women's championships and 6 league titles. In addition, she was a member of the national women's basketball team for 18 years and the captain of this team for 7 years. And she led her club team to 2 European Final Four appearances and was voted the top point guard during the final tournament. Annie she also worked at Sydney in the 2000 Olympics. She was the venue and competitive manager for softball in the Athens 2004 Olympics and was the appointed technical delegate for softball in 2008 in Beijing Olympics. She was also as the venue and sport manager for the World Special Olympic Games that took place in Athens in 2011. She received the Women and Sport Award by the International Olympic Committee. Boy, I could go on and on about Annie. Welcome, Annie.
Thank you for having me.
Ornella Muka. She is a former ACS Athens student, former ACS Athens basketball and academic scholarship recipient at ACS Athens, and currently a student at the University of California, Berkeley, also on a full scholarship. During her time at ACS, she received the Humanities Award when she graduated in 2020, and she currently is studying molecular and cell biology. Ornella participated and received many awards in the girls' varsity basketball and track and field team of our school, but she was also a member of the Albanian national team, U18, and a member of a national local basketball team, professional local team, where she also received many distinctions. It's really good to have you, Ornella, and to see you again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pelonis.
And last but not least, Anne-Marie Martino, a young lady that I'm really proud of, and she is a rising junior at ACS Athens, and she has been very involved with our Youth to Youth program, which is a program that provides opportunities, educational opportunities to young unattended refugee minors, and she's going to tell us about some of those lessons. Welcome, Anne-Marie.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pelonis. It is an honor to be here.
It's good to see you all, and I just want to get right back to Julie and ask you, Julie, tell us, please, you've developed a new approach to strategy at Widener. Would you tell us about it and how it foregrounds quality education for all?
Sure, thanks, Peggy. We're really excited about this. When we thought about strategic planning, we recognized that strategic planning tends to end up with a plan that is neither strategic, but rather restates what the institution is doing and says, we're going to do it better. And that isn't really agile and adaptable to the times. And we're in a time when things are changing very rapidly. And this was pre-pandemic that we were thinking about this. So we took a different approach and developed a very focused strategy, but that is very flexible and will adapt with the times. Our strategy is agility and an exceptional student experience. And it was developed by a core team that focused on the student of the future. And this is where I think this is so clearly linked to quality education for all, because we really thought about who are our students going to be? How are the demographics changing? We're seeing increasing diversity, which is wonderful, but we haven't adapted to meet the needs of our increasingly diverse students to the extent that we should and that we can. And so as we developed our strategy, we continually thought quality education for all of our students, not just the ones we have now, but the ones that we are going to have in the future, and recognizing rapid change in higher education and in the world around us. How will we be able to have a strategy that adapts, that isn't a published plan that we put in a binder with 80 goals that we check off because we feel like we have to do it, but that it is a guide for what we do to better meet the needs of our students and of our society in an agile way, always recognizing our focus is on quality education for all of our students, including those who may be different than the traditional students that we've served for so many years.
And you know, I really like that word agile that you use, because that's what it's all about right now with the pandemic, just pivoting and moving along and being agile. And I know, Julie, you and I and our institutions have had a partnership for a while. And I just tell us about your view about the relationship between K-12 and higher education in terms of providing quality education for all.
So one of the things that I think is really interesting is that colleges and universities tend to look at K-12 institutions and say, oh, they didn't prepare the students well enough, and I wish they could do better. And K-12 institutions look at colleges and universities and say, you know, we'd really like to prepare our students. We'd like a partnership so our students are really ready to move into college. So I think part of our sense of agility in the student experience is to make the boundaries much more fluid between K-12 and higher education, and to help students begin to think about the kind of work they're going to be doing in higher education as they are in high school. And that requires true partnerships, not just dual enrollment programs, and not just, people telling K-12 schools what they should be doing, or K-12 schools saying, why don't you, better transition students, but really having a partnership where we think about how do we help our K-12 students begin to tackle the kind of global problems that we think are going to be important, that are going to shape their university experience. And quality education for all is one example. Access to quality education is a problem. We focus on problems like that throughout our general education, and we look at it in an interdisciplinary way. How can we work with K-12 schools to help students begin to tackle those kinds of challenges and problems and projects while they're in high school, so that when they transition to college, they are better prepared? And I think you have some great examples at ACS Athens, Peggy, that actually you're going to talk about a little bit later with some of the projects that you've been doing with your current and former student.
And Julie, as you talk about that, I'm thinking about the chronically underserved groups who rarely get quality education. Would you tell us about your work in prison and education there, and how it reflects a vision of education for transformation?
Right. So this is a really important project to me. Widener University has had prison education courses for more than 20 years. Some of our courses are what are called inside out courses that combine our undergraduate students with incarcerated men in the local, our state local prison is a men's prison, in classes together. And some of them are classes that we offer to the men for credit without our Widener undergraduates there. But you can imagine that bringing our Widener undergraduates into that setting and getting to know incarcerated individuals as human beings, as people who may have made a mistake in their life but are working to turn that around, is an incredible social justice lesson for our students. I believe that education is transformational, and that's why I've spent my whole life, my whole career in education. And I think that when we think about quality education for all, we have to make sure we don't forget those truly underserved and forgotten populations like our prison populations, particularly because incarcerated individuals are going to come back into our society. And education is an incredible investment in reducing recidivism and making sure that they become contributing members of our society. So to me, it's an example of how we think about all those who are underserved in education and really create opportunities and use education to its full transformational power.
It's really amazing what you're doing nationally, but also how you're reaching out internationally. And it's really great to have that partnership with you. And speaking of internationally, Cam, let's talk a little bit about ECIS. And as the new COO of ECIS, how is ECIS going to work towards this goal?
So what we want to do is, with the heads we work with, so we have over 400 member schools. What we want to do is we want to intentionally develop change. So everything we do, learning is at the heart of that. But we want to help with the 61 million children that will not complete primary education. 1 in 6 children in many countries around the world that are low income are never going to complete their primary education. So what I want to do is work with our heads to say, how can we, with the resource we have, reach out to these students and actually make everything a little bit fairer for the people that we can reach out to? So that's one of the things we're going to be working on. We, with our SIGs, work on lots of conferences around inclusion, and our leadership conference this year is about diversity and belonging. So what I want to do is, with the heads we work with, really bring these questions to the forefront and think about how we can bring, just like Julie said, education to everybody, all those underrepresented people.
So Pam, you talk about thought leadership. Tell me a little bit about that. What is a thought leader in the eyes of ECIS, and how do you go about developing thought leadership?
So ECIS has always been recognized for thought leaders. So it's people actually just like Julie who are actually going into prisons and teaching themselves. When I was head of school, I did the same thing. I always felt that as the head of school, I still needed to teach. So it's about the things that people aren't thinking about. We've been doing a lot of work on a growth mindset as well.
Yeah.
You know, how we can really make positive change. So it's doing lots of new things. We're talking about agile coaching, and just like Julie, we're now looking at an agile strategy. You know, what is the education of the future going to look like? There's so much rapid change going on. So what we're doing at the moment is helping our schools. We're serving our community and saying to them, how can we connect you with the right people to bring the change that you all want? And that's what ECIS does. It serves the community, brings them together. And when there is something really fantastic like Julie is doing, we'll share that. So hopefully I'll be in contact with Julie after this, and we'll share this with the international community.
That's the best part, to create that kind of network. And how about you, Cam? I know that there's a lot of self-reflection that goes on into the process of developing these programs. How are you a learning leader?
So how am I a learning leader? So firstly, as you said, Julie is the first woman leader of Widener University. So I'm the first person of colour to be a leader of an association. And I want to open the door for others. And I also want people to realise that diversity brings something new. Don't expect assimilation to the white leaders. See what's happening, and how I've always been a lifelong learner. So for me, education has opened every door, and I share that with my children. I shared that with the children I taught. And through the network we have, we're constantly sharing articles, things that really provoke your thought and make you intentionally develop and think about things that you perhaps wouldn't have. So, I think we should, in education, we're all lifelong learners. And in every walk of life, we need to be a lifelong learner. It's the only way we can improve and move things along all the time.
We must be, mustn't we?
Yeah.
And along those lines, it's so important, as we talk about education, to also take care of the people that we educate and make sure that they are well, particularly at times like this. So coming over to David, just what inspired you? You work a lot with adolescents, and you talk about defending adolescent development in fiercely competitive schools. What inspired you to write that book?
How much time do we have? First of all, it's wonderful to see you, Peggy. Annie, it's nice to see you again. And Julie, I know we met at ACS a few years ago, so it's nice to see you again too. I was a newly minted psychologist back in 26 years ago in 1994. And I was hired that very year to be the head of psychology and the head of counseling department for this elite independent school here in New England. And, I was struck by the fact that I wasn't just encountering students with anxiety and depression, but mostly I was encountering students who had quite dangerous manifestations of those conditions, eating disorders and cutting themselves, and eventually increasing amounts of suicidal ideation and behavior. So after about 20 years of this, I had been giving workshops here in New England to schools and conferences. And I was invited to go and give a workshop with NISA, with the NISA organization in Bangkok. And when I had my team of people in Bangkok, I had about 40 or 50 participants in my in my workshop, I asked them first to identify a list of the symptoms of the kids who are struggling most in their schools. And as you know, NISA represents about 80 or 90 international schools in that region of Southeast Asia. And I was simply blown away by the list of symptoms that those teachers and counselors and deans presented, because they were the identical symptoms that I had been treating and working on with students here in the New England area. So that struck me that this wasn't just a New England phenomenon, that this was a worldwide phenomenon. Through a series of other interactions, I won't go into how I got into this interview, but one of my graduate school professors has developed something called the immunity to change process. Dr. Robert Keegan is his name, from Harvard University. And I had taken his course. I had become a certified member of the Immunity to Change workshop, to be a facilitator of that. And I started giving that workshop at schools and conferences around the world. And what I found was simply astounding. If you give me just a few minutes, I'd like to give you just a sense of what I found. I asked, first of all of the educators and administrators in schools, in light of the symptoms that they were experiencing, that they were witnessing in their schools, of kids being anxious and depressed, but also cutting themselves and suffering from eating disorders, and in quite times trying to kill themselves. I asked them specifically, what values do you have that have you complaining about these things? What concerns do you have that has you so concerned about the fact that X number of students in your schools are suffering these ways? And here are some of the things that they said. Those people said, let me go here. We are committed to presenting our students with an appropriate balance of challenge and rigor. We are committed to an authentic engagement with our students. We're committed to meeting our students where they are. We're committed to educating our students in healthy, safe, and balanced ways. We're committed to the health and the well-being of all of our students. The interview goes on, but the next question in the interview, and I've given this exact interview all around the world over the last probably 7 or 8 years. The next question is, in light of those values that you've just articulated in terms of how you are committed to educating your students in healthy and safe and balanced ways, what are you actually doing in your schools that has kids so anxious and depressed in the first place? And here's what they earnestly and honestly said. They said, these are teachers and administrators. We overschedule our students. We compress too much activity into an inadequate number of days and weeks. We always pile on more, and we're never willing to do with less. We over-focus on the college admissions process. It's all about college. We assign too much homework. We adhere to old notions of rigor and impose too much pressure on our students. We place too much emphasis, directly and indirectly, on grades. Here's one of my favorites. We expect our students to think like adults and to act like adults before they actually have those skill sets. And we praise the overachievers and we model overachieving. Some of the things they said they didn't do was, we don't follow reasonable homework guidelines, no matter what we say. We're not really inclined to meet kids where they are. We don't compromise on academic rigor. That is our currency. We don't set developmentally appropriate policies regarding study hours and lights out. These was for some of the boarding schools. And we don't have a shared understanding of the role of stress, the role that stress plays in the anxiety and the learning process. I'm getting to the end of this because when I get to this point, and by this time, the educators and parents, by the way, are feeling pretty negative about themselves. They've just admitted to all of these negative things that they've been actually imposing on their students. out of goodwill. And if I say, just imagine if you didn't impose all that schoolwork, if you didn't expect your students to act like adults and think like adults before they actually are adults, if you didn't over focus on the college process, what fears and what worries would come up for you? And what they said was, if we didn't overschedule and assign all that work and reinforce overachievement, then we the adults would be seen as having lost our standards and lacking in rigor and excellence. If we didn't do all of that over assigning of work and so on, then we would suffer in the college process. The colleges are ruling the roost. If we didn't overschedule our students and so on, then we would be perceived as intellectually soft. If we didn't do that stuff, then our students wouldn't get into good colleges and we would eventually lose our jobs. Here's one that really strikes out for me. If we didn't impose all that schoolwork, and if we didn't expect so much from them, if we didn't expect them to act like adults and think like adults, listen to this language. If we didn't do those things, this was from a senior administrator at one of New England's most prestigious boarding schools. This person said, then our reason for being would cease to exist. The value of our diploma would plummet, and no one would want to attend a school with such low academic standards. One more quote, and then I'll stop here. When I asked them things that they weren't doing, that they maybe should have been doing, this is again from one of the senior administrators of one of New England's most prestigious schools in the area. This person said, if we actually gave in and a developmentally appropriate schedule emerged, we might achieve a healthy balance for our students at the cost of our school's distinctiveness. We might lose our edge of excellence and become a vanilla school. And who would want to come to a vanilla school? So essentially what they did was say, at the same time that we are honestly committed to wanting to educate our students in healthy and safe and balanced ways, we are also trying to maintain the reputation of our school. We are also trying to protect our brand. We are also trying not to be seen as intellectually soft. We're trying to please our parents. We're trying to justify our high tuition, and so on. So this is what struck me, was that, and I'll stop with this piece and then we can go on to questions later. In my 30 years of being a psychologist in independent and international and public schools here in the US, when we have experienced students who have been struggling in one way or another, if they're anxious or they're depressed, or worse, they're cutting themselves, or they're complaining of thinking about suicide, what have we always done? We've always done what we thought we should have done, which was to send those students to people like me, to other psychologists and social workers and other mental health providers. And we say, here, take full advantage of these professionals who can help you feel better. You take these medications, they will probably help you feel better. But we have never, ever, ever looked in the mirror and asked ourselves, what are we doing, the adults in these schools, that has these kids so anxious and so stressed in the first place? So defending adolescent development in this book is about doing a whole 180, basically, and it's asking adults to take a look at what they're actually doing and to start changing their ways so that they are actually teaching their students in ways that meet their students' developmental capacities. My chapter 5 goes through an entire list of what are the actual developmental capacities of adolescent brains. And believe me, none of the things that the teachers are imposing on students are in sync with adolescent brain development. So we, the adults, have work to do.
So, David, that was a very comprehensive answer there. And so just one more along those lines, what do we do now as adults to become more developmentally empathic during the pandemic and hopefully after the pandemic?
Well, certainly before the pandemic, and it's been happening since the pandemic as well. One of the things that we do, I think, is something that ACS Athens does beautifully. They have what's called these learning groups, where groups of faculty members meet together about every month for about 2 hours, and they're grade diverse groups. And they come together, they work together, they collaborate together, they acknowledge their strengths together, they acknowledge their weaknesses together. The adults themselves grow. And as they grow, they learn more how to be more effective educators for their students. And in any one of your 4 or 5 groups, I know that you have, that Dave Nelson has organized there. You have kindergarten teachers, and you have 3rd grade teachers, and you have 5th grade teachers, and you have middle school teachers, and you have high school teachers. It's not just about rank and privilege. It's every teacher is involved with thinking about every kid. And when those groups come together and they stay together for years, ACS has had these groups for probably 9 or 10 years. And as a result, 2 things have happened. I've watched it happen because I've been to ACS at least 5 or 6 times. What happens is, first of all, the adults change and grow. We think of professional development in schools as going away to a conference, to some other country, to some other place, and hearing somebody speak. And then we think, oh, that was nice. And then we have dinner with our friends who we meet at the conference, and we come home and we've really learned not very much. That's not professional development. Professional development is learning and growing on the site of your school. And that's what these groups at ACS Athens are doing. The Critical Friends groups is what they're called, and they are spectacular. And as a result, the adults become vulnerable with each other, they learn with each other, they grow with each other, and as a result of that growth process, the students are being taught every single day by more developed, more grown adults who are not overwhelming them with the same amount of work and of pressure that they once did.
Thank you for that, David. And if anybody thinks about a balanced adolescent, it's our athletic director, Annie. And Annie, I just want to come to you and ask you, as athletic director and a former pretty well-known basketball star, you help young men and women achieve their educational dreams. Can you tell us about that?
I am a firm believer that sport is education. And I really believe that the values one can learn through sport are values of education all over the world. Of course, in athletics, you have different levels of athletics, but when we talk about institutions, we talk about education-based athletics. And the main purpose of the education-based athletics is the growth and the development of young people. So over the years, we at ACS Athens are trying to instill in our student athletes the value of both. Again, through the years, we try to develop programs where student athletes can mature, where student athletes can thrive. And again, at ACS Athens, there's a synergy between the faculty members and our counseling services, and myself and all the coaches in the department. We provide avenues and tools and networking so our student athletes could actually take the path even through higher education. We believe that both can exist at high levels. We believe that both academics, obviously, and athletics can shape a young student. And over the last 10 years, I would say, we have a number of our student athletes that have went on to continue in higher institutions, whether in the UK or Europe or in the United States. And again, this is a firm belief of our institution. And it's, again, there's a synergy among all constituents of our school. And we methodically guide our student athletes to reach the educational goal through what they love, through their passion, which in this case,
Now, obviously, this
it's
is a
sports.
value that the institution highly holds, but it's also a value that you, manifest in many different ways. What do you consider quality education, and how do you reach those who are less privileged and don't have access to the kind of education that a school like ACS could provide for students?
Well, I believe education and quality education can be provided to a number of students. I'm a firm believer of synergies, not only within our school, but also outside of school. I think it's important to connect with other individuals, to connect with other entities. I can just say, for example, from the International Olympic Committee, there are programs that are there for example, social inclusion of forcibly displaced people through sport and physical activity. There are programs about education and promotion of gender equality. There's another organization of Peace in Sport, and again, through sport, they believe in educating the less fortunate. So I believe that out there in the world, and the networking and the collaboration among institutions is one way of reaching to a number of students that perhaps may not have those opportunities.
And you yourself as an athlete, you have had many experiences, but how difficult or easy is it to excel both as an athlete and in academics?
I wouldn't say it's difficult. I wouldn't say it's easy. I would say it's challenging. And I would also say that there needs to be guidance. Personally, I had a lot of guidance at the time. There needs to be a focus, and both can be achieved. There needs to be discipline, there needs to be motivation. So a lot of traits and values need to be alongside, to be there. And as I was, of course, growing up as an adolescent, I was fortunate that my family was very supportive. I was fortunate that my school was very supportive, which at the time was ACS Athens. And through my, when I went to McGill, again, there was a great support system. And through my professional career, because I also pursued further degrees when I was even out in the working world, I believe that it is possible. People just have to have their goals set well in advance, and slowly but surely, it's easy to reach your goals with a lot of effort and a lot of work.
And now you're in a position to be able to influence young people to also reach their goals. And one of these young people is with us today, Ornella, and it's so wonderful to see you. We missed you, but it sounds like you're doing great over there at UC Berkeley. Can you tell us about your journey of education? How did you come to the American Community Schools of Athens, and then how did you get to University of California at Berkeley?
Yes, of course. So as a young kid, I always dreamt about a life abroad and particularly in the US. But I knew that this was just a dream and would never become a reality for me, mainly because of my financial background and the lack of knowledge in that age. However, this all changed in 2017 when Coach Panayotopoulos, who was my coach at my club team at that time, spoke to me about the opportunities offered by ACS. Since his daughter was a senior in this school that had also received the 3-year athletic and academic scholarship. And the funny thing is, in this story was the fact that I had never heard of ACS before, and I didn't even know that such an American private school existed. So learning about the philosophy and the opportunities that this school offered, I immediately fell in love with the idea of going to ACS, as I knew that this was a perfect place for me to grow. And I remember vividly how passionate I was and how important it seemed to me back then, and it still is a huge part of me. Thus, I contacted ACS, and then I went to the basketball tryouts while also taking the admissions exam. And that is mainly how I received this 3-year athletic and academic scholarship, which I am forever grateful for.
So what
Sure.
was it that motivated you to grow and to develop in such an environment? And why was this education significant in shaping your future? What kept you going? What kept that drive alive throughout this school system?
Of course. I would say that the environment that I was brought up in was a major contribution to my constant motivation to learn and grow each and every day. My parents didn't have the chance to finish high school as they had to work to support their families, even though they really wish they could pursue higher education and have a better chance in life. And from my parents, I had to learn to fight so I could stand a good chance of getting what I deserve. And so from a very young age, my parents worked around the clock every single day so they can provide me and my sister with values to become well-rounded individuals and educated that strive to become successful. So being always diligent in order to provide the best childhood for us was a turning point in making me want to work really hard in everything I will ever do. And apart from my parents, I would say that the community of ACS was another major contribution to my motivation, as everyone supported me like a member of a family, and I wouldn't become what I am today without them. So I was instantly embraced and welcomed by the ACS community. Dr. Yela Mas, Dr. Pelonis, and Miss Annie Konstantinidis stood by my side since day one, making me feel the best version of myself.
So Ornella, where do you hope to go from here? What are your dreams now?
First and foremost, I really hope that I will be able to give back to people as the community of ACS did for me. And from this point forward, I really want to excel in basketball and academics. And my mutual dream, let's say, is to play basketball at the highest level and pursue a career in the medicinal field, maybe at some point, and hopefully make a change doing
Wonderful.
what I love the
Wishing
most.
you all the best. And you talked about giving back to the community, and earlier both Julie and Cam talked about how important that is for students to have that opportunity to develop, the skills to do that. So getting to Anne Marie, who is a rising junior at ACS and really has been involved with the Youth to Youth program. The Youth to Youth program is a Saturday program where young unattended refugee minors come to the school, and we have developed programs on a voluntary basis where our faculty and students come and teach these young people language skills and other kinds of skills. And you've been involved with these young students, Anne Marie, who don't have the opportunity because of their circumstances. How did you get involved in that, and what have you learned in the process?
So I will start with middle school, and in middle school, I was enlightened with a broad amount of information pertaining to the refugee crisis. And this information emphasized both its local and global effects. And exposure to the crisis served as a key component in fueling my passion for human rights and, of course, quality education for all. A few years later, after carrying out my own research on the matter and observing the lingering effects of forced displacement around me, I knew I had to somehow help my community, others surrounding me, and more specifically, help unaccompanied refugee minors. I wanted to help them secure a bright future as well as chat with them and ensure they had a person their age for them whenever they needed help. I started being involved in the Youth to Youth program when a teacher within the ACS community reached out to me when I started high school, and she encouraged me to join the initiative, which aims to offer refugee youth a quality education at ACS Athens. And shortly after the discussion with my teacher, I made it a goal to attend the program
And
every
what
single
exactly
Saturday.
do you do in the Youth to Youth program, and what's the ultimate goal?
So the Youth to Youth program is an ACS Athens service project in collaboration with the Home Project, which is a non-governmental organization that aims to address the needs of refugee children by providing them with shelter and support. The Youth to Youth program is designed to assist unaccompanied refugee children in adjusting to their local community through education. In the Youth to Youth program, student volunteers from high school and sometimes into middle school, as well as teachers and faculty, contribute some hours of their time every single Saturday in order to teach refugee youth. And classes usually start at 9:30 a.m. and they are split into groups of girls and groups of boys with the same experience level. Of course, the ultimate goal is to make students feel as comfortable as possible and help them learn basic as well as advanced skills in subjects such as English, Greek, computers, music, art, physical education, and even business. However, I think one goal that is not often talked about, but anyone that has worked in the program can agree upon, is the fact that every single person that volunteers their time in the program tries their absolute best to help young unaccompanied minors feel welcome and to make them feel like they're a part of a wider community, without, of course, trying to strip them of their individual identity. And furthermore, the schedules between a younger student and older student, more advanced student, differ. For example, for the older students, we have what some of us call business to youth, which is catered towards helping older students integrate into society by working and having a job. In business to youth, the students are taught about concepts such as negotiation, how to act during a job interview, and how to find their passion. Although I think this more advanced schedule definitely caters to older students that aim to work in jobs in the near future, I do believe the beginner and less advanced classes are equally as important. These classes introduce students to basic vocabulary and grammar in English and Greek, and they help students understand how to create a Word document or Excel file in computer class. They help students maintain their creativity through art and music classes, and they encourage them, above all, to be curious, ask questions, and learn whenever possible.
And as a result of that program, we had this amazing benefactor, Ed Shapiro from the Shapiro Foundation, who has donated a significant amount of money for some of those students to attend ACS full time. But everybody talks about how much these young unaccompanied minors are gaining from this program. But really, there's another side to that, isn't it? And those of you who are students here at ACS, like yourself, are also learning a lot from what's going on from those experiences. What do you think? How has this impacted you, and what have you been learning in the process?
Yes, of course. I do believe it's a mutual learning experience, which is what makes it so fun and what fuels me to go to the Youth to Youth program every Saturday. Being friends and discussing with some students that are part of the program, I understand how fortunate I am that my education has not been interrupted due to environmental factors. I'm fortunate enough to be going to the same school since I was young, ACS Athens, and I'm fortunate enough to be healthy and have the opportunity to give back to my community. The Youth to Youth program definitely has a magical component, and I remember how proud I was the first time I helped a girl write her first essay in English. And what the Youth to Youth program does exceptionally well is it engages students and encourages them to be lifelong learners. Since the life of these unaccompanied minors now is drastically different than it was 2 or 4 years ago, the Youth to Youth program aims to teach these children about the importance of education, developing autonomy, and creating their own futures when someone else tries to take their future away from them. There are certain events and situations that we will never be able to control, but we are all able to control our mindset. And with the assistance of teachers, friends, and a positive environment, and of course, willingness to work hard and learn every day, I believe that even the impossible can be done. Each and every one of the students is fully capable of achieving greatness, and I aim to teach them that every time we collaborate with them. And as a student myself, after having understood the importance of hard work and collaboration because of the Youth to Youth program, I try to remind myself that no matter the circumstances, I can work hard in order to pursue and achieve my goals. And having people that support me in my immediate environment will encourage me to achieve even the impossible.
It's really so inspiring to hear young people like you and young voices like both of you, and being so involved in what it takes to make the world a better place. As a cliche as that sound, as that sounds. But I want to just kind of go back to our entire panel and just open it up with one last question. If you had, any one piece of advice or request from policymakers in relation to education, or the large organizations like, places like the United Nations, UNESCO, and so on and so forth, what would you want them to know and to be able to change so that we can do even better?
So I believe life will always have its ups and downs. That's just a given. But the most important takeaway is what someone learns about themselves and their surroundings through these ups and downs. I think a proper education, which encompasses not only learning mathematics or science, but one that helps students apply their learning in a real world environment, and also teaches students that they're capable, that if they work hard, they will become better in something. I think that's what the essence of education is, and that's the message I would like to spread. Quality education for all is a human right. It is important because we cannot control everything. We cannot control the weather. We cannot control every move our world leaders make. And we cannot predict with 100% accuracy what will happen tomorrow. But we can try to take matters into our own hands by educating ourselves and others, because without education, it is easy for people to diminish us and make us feel like we're not worthy of a bright future. After working with unaccompanied refugee minors, listening to their stories, talking with them, and being an active member of the Youth to Youth program, it is so obvious to me that quality education and the support of family, friends, and teachers are definitely the top factors. I think that through quality education, people can not only become global citizens, aiming to learn every day and assist their communities, but they will also be confident in their ability to secure a brighter future for themselves.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Anyone else would like to jump in with that one?
Peggy, I would say that I would say to world leaders, policymakers, there is nothing more important to invest in than education. Education is the foundation for solving all of our problems. And if we don't recognize that and make sure that we are educating all of the world's children, all of the world's people, to help us continue to address the problems we face and create a better world, we're really not meeting our responsibility as within our own societies and as a
Thank you, Julie.
global
Well
society.
said. Very well said. Would anyone else like to jump in and as we get ready to close the session?
I can't resist, Peggy. I just want to tell a quick story. If any parent were to treat a 16-year-old adolescent like a 10-year-old, the 10-year-old would, like the 16-year-old would say, "Stop treating me like a child. I am 16 now. I'm not a 10-year-old." That would be a developmental error of 6 years. But if that same parent or that same teacher were to treat the 16-year-old as if he or she were 22, that would be the same 6-year developmental error. And there's a lot of development that happens in the human brain between 16 and 22. And my request would be that the adults grow and to recognize that they are teaching adolescents, not adults. and that their job as adults is to grow and to learn what that means so that they're not overpowering, overwhelming, and overpressuring kids by teaching them well beyond their developmental capacities.
It's great that we have people like you to remind us of that, David.
Thank you.
Can I just jump in and say something as well? What I'd like for people and policymakers and leaders to understand is that education is multifaceted. And I think it's important to realize that, and it's important to provide the opportunities for every single child, every adolescent to explore what is out there and to grow in what they may be good at. Not everybody can be a doctor, not everybody can be a mathematician, but every single individual has the right and the ability and the capability to be educated. And that's it for me.
Thank you. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us today and really highlighting this very important goal, Sustainable Development Goal number 4, quality education for all. And more importantly, thank you all for what you're doing in your relevant areas and across the world. And I think that the world is in better hands because of you. Thank you, and see you soon.
Thank you, Peggy. Thanks for including us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.